Preparing live stream. Okay, we're live on Facebook, as far as I can tell. YouTube. All right. Preparing live stream. We're live on both of them. Hold on. I'm just gonna press the recording here.
Cool.
This is the first time I've been able to get both of them live. This is so exciting for me because every time I get on, we either can't go live on Facebook or YouTube. So this is really cool.
Awesome.
Welcome coaches who are watching. I'm really excited for this episode. We have a really special guest today. Before I go into that, I just wanted to share this is the Coaches Journey podcast, and it's sponsored by CMC, Coaching Mastery Community. And it is a community of coaches from all around the world. It's a virtual community, and we're hoping to meet in person after all this lockdown. What we do is we help coaches create business mastery within their coaching business and coaching mastery within their skill sets within a supportive community where we share resources, thoughts, perspective, strategies that help us move forward together, not alone, not dreading the whole process. I've been a member for a while now, and while Carla is not a member, she is a certified high performance coach, and we'll go into that. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Carla. Carla, welcome to this.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Being here. I'm so excited to introduce you guys to Carla, and I'm so excited to get to know her. I know a little bit about Carla, but I've heard so many awesome things about her, and she has coached leaders, and there's an interesting term that she has highly sensitive person or highly sensitive leaders that she's coached. And tech companies, and I believe investors as well, and investors, leaders who are doing very well. And she's going to go into that, how she picked that as a niche. But she'll also be sharing her 5-step process to get your first client as well as we go through it. But before that, I want to actually jump into her coach's journey, into her journey as a coach. How did she get to this point? And to me, that's always interesting. I think coaches have some of the most amazing stories. So please share with us how you got to this point in your coaching journey, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
Tell us a little bit about what you do and all the details.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, my name is Carla Blumenthal, and I am a coach for empathic and sensitive leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs. And a lot of my clients struggle with what I call the 4 O's. So those are overthinking, overworking, overgiving, and overwhelm. And so whether they are working in a corporate job and wanting to, have new goals in their job, their career, or just generally their lifestyle, or they want to start and grow their businesses, they realize that there's sort of an inside job that they need to work on around those 4 O's to support them in their next level. So I'll share a little bit more about the empath and sensitivity side in a minute, but I'm definitely an empath and more of a sensitive person. So I feel deeply. I notice a lot of details and things around me, which I think makes me a really strong coach, but also leads to a lot of challenges in business. So I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, my story. Let's see. I always like to start from the beginning. So growing up, I was pretty quiet and shy. And I loved learning about people, though. I was very curious. Why do people do what they do? And so I did a lot of theater growing up because I was super interested in character development and understanding people's emotions. And it felt really safe to be a character and emote. And so I ended up studying communications and marketing because I realized that was a way to really take some of this understanding about why people do what they do, but in more of a business context, understanding consumer behavior and applying that to business. So I moved to New York City in 2009 and worked at a couple of different marketing roles. So I worked at a social media agency right when that was booming in 2009, helping clients like Microsoft and Visa with their first really social media profiles, and then moved on to a fast-growing health foods company, and was the first social media manager there. And I was actually let go from that job in 2014, which for someone who was sort of perfectionistic and really just sort of type A, was quite devastating and really left me at a place of, I was in my late 20s saying, okay, how did I get here? What do I want to do? And really had some big questions at this moment. And it was at that time I actually worked with my first coach. She was a psychologist and a coach. And I really learned a lot just through my own coaching around who I was and what I wanted to create in my life. So I noticed there was something really powerful about coaching. Through that, she actually hired me on to do marketing for her. So I continued to work with her. And during this time, I also launched a small organization called Tea Plus Purpose, because I love drinking tea and having meaningful conversations. Basically, I hosted tea groups throughout New York City, San Francisco, Orlando, Seattle, trained other people to run these tea groups as well and host these discussions, and ended up at a networking event. This was in 2015, sharing with people about what I was up to with Tea Plus Purpose, and talked to a pretty successful CEO of a real estate company here in the city. And he emailed me the next day and said, "You seem really empathic. Can you coach me on how to have more empathy?" And that blew my mind because I had never considered myself a coach. I had not been trained as a coach. And someone sort of reflected to me that something that I had that I was interested in, which was sort of facilitation and consciousness and learning a little bit more. So that started my coaching journey, was sort of someone else reflecting that to me. And so from about 2015 to 2019 was trained under actually my first coach and licensed therapist. She trained me, and also I became a certified high performance coach in 2019 through Brendan Burchard's program. And so that's what I really organically started my coaching business, first as sort of a side hustle in those years, and then went full time in 2019. But that's a bit of my story of really connecting the dots from when I was young, around like just being a little bit more, having a lot of curiosity and noticing a lot of things about emotions, into realizing that that's what I do now professionally. So that's a bit about my journey.
Wow, that is an incredible journey. I love that. It's funny. I feel like I'm talking to a female version of myself. Because a lot of what you're saying is kind of how I felt growing up too, and the things that I was interested in. I didn't go onto your career path, but that is a whole different story initially. But even the beginning of your coach's journey, as somebody else relayed that to you, that, hey, can you help me with that? And for me, it was very similar. It was one of my closest friends, a friend who was laid off from a job. And I just was going there, supporting him, having conversation. And he's like, you've really helped me through this. I'm like, really? I have? I was just doing this, and then that made me start to pay attention. Hey, maybe I can help people with this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I love the journey that you've been on, and I love that path where you get coached, and then you realize how powerful the process is, and then you go towards it. And that's a really cool process. So I'm curious, a couple of things in there. How do you define an empath for yourself? And then maybe you can talk a little bit about that highly sensitive person, because I'm guessing it's connected to that.
Totally. So yes, so the highly sensitive person, I actually always have the book right by me. It's actually a coined term by Dr. Elaine Aron. And it sort of emerged in the psychology studies in the 90s. So it's a relatively new term. But basically what they uncovered is that there was a difference between introversion and this new area of study they were uncovering. What they realized is that highly sensitive people make up about 15 to 20% of the population. It's sort of just a temperament. It's a way that your nervous system sort of responds to the world. And it's really comprised of an acronym of four really traits. The acronym is in the DOES, so does. And high level D stands for depth of processing. So what that means is that you're processing the world around you probably a little bit more than other people. You're taking in a lot of details, really thinking things through a lot, probably not taking as much action maybe as other people. You probably lean more towards collecting more information, processing it before you decide. The O stands for overwhelm and overstimulation. Because you're taking in so much of that, you typically, your nervous system often is more overstimulated or overwhelmed than others. E stands for emotional reactivity and empathy. So this is where the empath or empathy side of it comes in, is that because highly sensitive people are noticing so many things around them, they're very attuned to other people's facial expressions, to what's going on with other people's moods. And so they often have some studies have shown that the empathy part of their brains often activate more than others. And then the last one, the S, is subtleties. So this is noticing a lot of very small details around you. So that's DOES, depth of processing, overwhelm, emotional reactivity, empathy, and subtle stimuli. Now, I want to share a quick story about how I realized I was highly sensitive, and empath sometimes is a term that is used. They're slightly different, but oftentimes are used interchangeably. But I worked at, as I said, a social media agency, and I was at a client offsite. And I shared with my boss after the meeting, I said, "Oh, did you realize," like we were debriefing, I said, "Did you realize how the client like shifted in her chair?" And she looked a little bit uncomfortable. And he said to me, "Carla, I want you to really hear this with love and compassion. You notice a lot of things that other people do not." And he said it with in a positive way. And I realized, how do people not notice that? How do people not notice these small nuances? And what I realized in that moment, it was just one little clue, but that I was picking up on other small details and things that other people didn't notice, especially when it came to dynamics and relationships. So that was just one example from my 20s where I noticed, okay, there's something slightly different. And then over the past several years, as I've learned more just about highly sensitive, I realized that I am one, and I'm very proud to be one. And I also serve clients who are more empathic or highly sensitive, because I think there are a lot of strengths but then a lot of shadows that come with that as well. And if you are interested if you just look up highly sensitive person self-test, Dr. Elaine Aaron has a full online test that you can take to see if you are highly sensitive.
I love that. Well, that was such an amazing, in-depth explanation of what a highly sensitive person is, and I love your story. And it's actually one of the things that whenever I'm in conversation, this actually came up 2 years ago when I started having these conversations with coaches. Originally, it wasn't coaching mastery community; it was just a bunch of coaches getting together and talking, just like this. And as we kept talking, a couple of things became very obvious. One, first of all, we assume that the way we look at the world is like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And we assume that, and we think, oh, that person looks at it that way. Yeah. And within these conversations, especially because we're having deeper conversations about sessions, clients, how we're working through it, we start to realize, holy shoot, we don't think the same way. We don't reach conclusions the same way. We don't even notice certain things that others might notice. And that might not even be our frame of mind when we're approaching these sessions. And this is why we realize this could be the same topic, and the same person, the coach, will take in a completely different direction, because that coach's perception matters in that piece. And then the other side of it is even more interesting, because there are things that we do think the same way with, and that's what makes us human. Those are there. And what was interesting is the things that is kind of more specific to us, we assume others think. The things that are not specific to us, we're like, oh, I don't know if this person is thinking that. I don't know if I should talk about this. But it's common to all of us.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, because it helped us understand, like, holy shoot, this is really amazing. And it applies to coaching so much, especially in group sessions that I've talked to clients. One of the things that I actually do is I help them see these two sides. I help them see that usually the problems and the challenges and that are common to humans around the world. And I tell them that humans have human challenges. They don't have religious challenges. They don't have gender challenges. They don't have all these. They have human challenges, which means their thoughts, their emotions, their identity, which means their vision, their goals, their day-to-day struggle around everything else, their fulfillment, meaning. These are the things that humans care about at some level, conscious or subconscious level. It doesn't matter what part of the world you come. It shows up differently for every person, but it's all the same. And as they start to hear each other out, it's like, holy shoot, I'm not alone. I'm not alone on this journey. And then the other side of it is they don't notice at all their unique aspects. I'm like, that's incredibly, tell me a little bit more about that. And then as they start sharing, they're like, holy shoot, there is something unique about me.
Mm-hmm. So spot on. I'm in the second week of my group program, the Empathic Leadership Collective, where we have just empathic leaders coming together for coaching and connection. And that is one of the main takeaways they shared with me last night, which is feels so good to come together and have real conversations, but also like know that I'm not alone. And that's what you were sharing, is like, it's a human challenge and desire, I think, to learn and grow, and also be in community too. So super powerful.
Yeah. So I want to go towards, and I love the idea of, because your niche is very psychology based. It's like and I love that. And that's what even in my business, I've realized I never had a niche until I realized it's actually more somebody's psychology that attracts me. And what attracts me is more people who have very big visions, people who are leader oriented, and they don't even realize that they're leaders until we actually start going deeper. But they feel this sense of responsibility towards creating some kind of change. They feel this sense of responsibility to connect with others. And they are actually, on my side as well, they're pretty sensitive, most of my clients. So you're actually helping me realize this other aspect, because I am like that, I do tend to attract those clients. Now, my question to you is, how are you attracting these clients? Like, how did that begin for you, and have you created a system around that?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was very organic. And this is where actually I created the 5-step process that I'll share with everyone, because it was through my own learned experience, of sort of saying, okay, I have this intention. I'm so excited about becoming a coach. I worked with one client. How do I do this? And I think that's where a lot of coaches start out. They're so excited about becoming a coach, and then they get to the business side of it and they're like, what do I do? Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah. And that's where, unfortunately, I feel like some people stop. And whether you're a coach or maybe you're a consultant, some of my clients are consultants that, for example, I work with a feng shui consultant and a learning design consultant. But I feel like if you're in transformation in general, you can go through this process. So I think a lot of people start at that business line thinking that, okay, I need to do business. So they start looking in different places. So they look, I need to have a brand, right? I need my logo. I need my custom website. They say, I need to be putting out a ton of content. So let me perfect my Instagram grid, post content everywhere. Or they say, I need advertising. Like I'll use, Facebook, Instagram to grow my business. Now, here's the thing. Those are all viable growth strategies. I use them all now. They're great. Except I think when you're starting out, they are unnecessarily complicated. And here's why. One, these can all take a long time and cost potentially thousands of dollars before you even speak to potential clients. Two, and this is something that I learned the hard way, is you need to have strong skills in copywriting, Facebook ads, which is like a whole other universe to learn, web development, design, like just to get started. And I think, when I saw all of that, and I saw the way I was naturally attracting clients, I thought, okay, there's got to be a better way, because I sort of started very organically. And I realized that other coaches and consultants were maybe making it a little bit harder than they had to. And so my insight before I get to the process is that the most simple and direct path it's often overlooked, is to go through the people you already know, who already know, like, and trust you, and get either warm introductions to potential clients or to other people who can support you. And that is a really important insight that I just want to pause for a minute and hope people can take in, that your network is already there. And in the beginning, you don't necessarily need to go outside of it. Why don't you use what you've already built in a very authentic and organic way?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it sounds very, very closely, painfully familiar to me, that whole process, because I went through the whole process initially.
Yeah.
I'm going to do the Facebook, I'm going to do the Instagram, I'm going to figure out the ads, I'm going to figure out the webinar. I was literally doing 50,000 things. None of them were translating to anything. And my first clients came from either somebody who was introduced me, just like a warm welcome, or somebody who had coached, and my friends and family who then started referring people to me. Mm-hmm. That's where they came from. And it's a lot of coaches, and this is the part that's interesting. I went to the engineering field, and I spent about 2 years. I didn't really make a lot of really long-lasting relationships. I could not stand the field. It went the complete opposite of my highly sensitive side. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really have a lot of work people to go towards, like business people. And so I started with like my friends and family. I was forcing them to be for the most part. Some of them ran away, but a couple of them I got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
And that translated to clients, and those clients translated to other clients. So there is one question though here, and this is really, I've often, especially coaches who are beginning, everything is about, hey, I need to find clients. Which I understand. You need to generate leads, you need to talk to clients, you need to have those conversations. It's very important for your business. But they think that that's the biggest problem. I don't think that's the biggest problem, because I think you can find humans to coach. that's not the biggest problem. I feel like it is can you add enough value for them to create referrals? Can you add enough value for them to spread the word? Can you do that in terms of your skill sets and what you're doing? And more than likely, initially, even if we have the disposition to be a good coach, we're still working through a lot of challenges in terms of, like, how do I take this person from point A to point B? How do I help this person? And there's a lot of trial and error. And a lot of times I think back to that first 2 years of my coaching. I'm like, I want to reach out to those clients and say sorry sometimes, because I just knew what I knew, and I wouldn't have done the things that I did within the sessions. I don't know what I was doing, to be honest. So, but I was experimenting. There was a lot of time there. And I often say this to the beginner coaches. I'm like, especially within the conversation of getting clients. So let's say if I were to hand all my amazing clients to you, how long do you think you can keep them? And how many referrals do you think you're going to generate out of them? And how confident are you about that? More than likely, not many. And the reason I say this, not because of an ego thing, but because if I handed those clients to somebody that was me 5 years from now on, I would have lost those clients pretty quickly. Because the clients I work with, they've done a lot of work on themselves. And those are the clients who probably pay a lot. Those are the clients who want to grow more. Those are the clients who want to get to the next level. So I'm curious on your side. So one side is to, reach out to your network. But the other side of it is your coaching skill sets. What have you done to grow? And do you feel like that's important in the process?
Yeah. Well, first, Faisal, I want to really celebrate that I think there's just such a great example that you shared of, like, I stuck with it. I didn't know what I was doing. I went through the uncomfortable experience of doing both the coaching that maybe, I wasn't 100% sure about, and then also the business side. And I think that's such a great example of saying, just keep going. And you're going to learn more as you keep going. I think there's a lot of times people just stop because they're like, I'm not sure what to do next, or it's too uncomfortable. And so that, I think, is a big part. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm always in process of learning and growing both the business side of things as well as the my coaching skill sets. I mean, I've been a part of so many different coaching programs, from CHPC, or learning from my original therapist and coach for several years, as well as different programs that I've been in, like virtual coach and different things like that. But I'm always in conversation with different coaches around let's look at what we've done together, what you've done. Let's look at the past month and talk about, like, what were your learnings? What were your wins? What were your challenges? And really learning and growing through that. So I feel like it's just like, when you choose to become a coach, you are always in that process. You are always saying, okay, let me look at this client engagement. What did I learn? What could I have done better? How could I have supported them differently? And so there's just an ongoing process of that. And I think that's the important thing, is you never stop, really.
Yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you are on that consistent journey of self-assessment and really saying, how can I support this client? Because at the end of the day, it's actually none of this is about us. Yes, we are on this journey with our clients, but see, I look at it more like a calling for me. Whenever I share this with my wife, she kind of laughs. She's like, why do you use those terminologies? It wasn't until she became a coach and she's like, kind of feels like that. Like I told you, it's like more like a pull towards, and it's not really, maybe it's not even the coaching, maybe it's that the process of transformation for that person, which actually helps you transform in the process. I've learned a lot in this about myself. In fact, I'd say I think I'm more self-interested a lot of times to learn about how can I help this person grow, and if I focus on this person, I naturally grow in the process. And that's, and I also love what you said, that you're always in conversation with coaches. That's the way because we only have one perspective. And maybe we've learned some other perspectives as we've gone through books, through speakers, through so many things. But then what is your live perspective? And the way I like to look at it is that when I'm in a session, I don't just want it to be me. Yeah, I want it to be my authentic self, but I want an army of coaches behind me. And that only comes when I know what coaches are trying. What are they trying differently? What if this doesn't work? What's my alternative to move this person? And there are times in coaching sessions, whether in one-on-one group, coaches get stuck. It's like, what the hell do I do now? There's so many challenging situations that I've been in. Like, if I didn't have those perspectives, I wouldn't have been able to move forward. And I love the fact that you do both of those. Now, I didn't want to derail your 5-step process. So you did mention, so the first one is to go to your contacts, the ones that you know.
Yeah. So I'll walk you through the first, the 5 high level, and then we'll do a deep dive into each of them. So the first is to prospect. I'll just share how. So prospect, outreach, conversation, enrollment, and client. So prospecting is similar to what we've talked about, but I have a particular process I walk clients through around really going through their email, their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, but also getting creative and thinking about, okay, who do I know that aren't on those platforms? Usually like older people, maybe, a friend of your parents, or an aunt or something like that, who might be able to support you. And the main mindset with the prospecting phase is that this is not about getting clients. This is about coming forward as a newish coach and saying, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. So this whole process is more about generating authentic conversation versus saying, hey, let me coach you. So that's the main nuance here of like, if you love coaching, most likely you love connecting with people. And that's really the insight here of how can you do that, leveraging the connections and people you already know, versus spending a bunch of time, designing a webinar or having to gain different skill sets when you haven't really built out much of your coaching practice yet. So the first part of this authentic connecting is that prospecting phase. And you'll basically order them around who is closest to your ideal client. And if you don't know your ideal client, that's totally fine too, because just think about who is someone that looks like they're growing, they're doing things, they're interesting, and sort of go from there. So the prospect is making that list. Second is outreach. And I really spend a lot of time with clients on who are nervous to do this, to have to develop some type of outreach, whether it's a voice memo or an email. I love sending voice messages these days just because it feels a little bit more personal, and really saying something personalized about them, like, hey, saw you got a new job, a new puppy, you moved, whatever it might be. But saying that, like, hey, like, I see this is going on in your life. I'm connecting with people. We can't, I know in 2020 and 2021, when I've done this, I've said, we can't really meet up for coffee or a drink. So let's connect over Zoom or a quick phone call. Just wanted to share, just wanted to connect, see how you're doing, and share, hear what's happening in your world and mine. I've done this with people who I haven't spoken with. There was someone I hadn't spoken with in almost 10 years and had a really lovely ongoing conversation with them who was very interested in coaching. Just different people who I planted the seed with over the past several years. And those seeds have bloomed. And sometimes it's not always immediate, but sometimes it is. But the idea here is you're really setting the groundwork for long-term business growth. So that's the outreach, is really sending that personalized outreach. Next is conversation. So this is just having conversations with people that you already know, having a high-level agenda of hearing what's going on in their world, sharing what's going on with you, and then I do really encourage people to make professional asks. And what I mean by that is just saying, hey, do you know someone that might be a fit for what I'm doing? It's sort of, it's light, but it's directed. Or do you know someone who might be sort of complementary to what I'm doing? Maybe it's someone that works in HR, or someone that maybe it's another coach or something, like someone that might be a connection. So it's important to have these conversations, really being the relationship leader in these conversations. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're talking the whole time. You're asking a lot of questions to them and connecting, and then lightly at the end making those questions, those asks. And then the final two steps are basically when sometimes in the past, people have said, actually, that is me. And so I say, great, let's schedule another call. So the next step is enrollment. And that's a process where we really, with my clients, I work on how do you run that sales call, that enrollment call in a really authentic way. So that's sort of a whole other conversation we could have. And then lastly is client. So, signing the client and getting started. But I spend most of my time in those beginning three phases, because I think a lot of people can hear the process and say, okay, sounds pretty straightforward, but it's not so much what to do. Sometimes it's the internal process of overcoming, oh my gosh, I have to put myself out there and so-and-so is going to judge me or whatever it might be. So I think I'm being pushy. That is the stuff that we work through, because if it feels good and if it feels aligned and authentic, then things will happen. It's just that internal stuff we have to come over. So I've had many instances of planting these seeds and them blooming into clients. Sometimes people ignore my emails for 2 months and then message me saying, how do I sign up for coaching? Or different clients who have done this and generated referrals and connections. So I think it's important to know the process, but also really work through the internal stuff to move forward.
Yeah, I love that 5-step process. So here are the challenges that I hear from beginners, including me as I was starting out. I love the prospecting area where you are actually looking to have conversations with people that you feel aligned with, and those conversations are really, really important, and they're not going to happen without you putting yourself out there. And this is the big challenge with coaches. I think in a greater sense, it's easier to put yourself on in social media than actually reach out to a person and talk to them. That was actually more scary for me. And then it's even more scary to go through a whole conversation. You've added so much value, you've connected so much, hey, this is what I do. So there's a covert coach complex going on, which many coaches like. How do you transition from that to that? So, and I love your personalized message. By the way, there isn't something I use. You use voice memos. I've started using Loom. It's a video message. Just send the link. Like somebody I hired who did my copy and design, she introduced me to it, and we were going back and forth on product. Like, I love this. So I started sending those personalized messages. Initially, I started using it for let's say the client didn't sign up after the sales call, I would send them that a short video, personalized video. But I love your perspective on make it more personal, because when it's personal, they will listen, they will pay attention, and then they'll get to the next step. So I'm just curious. So you being a highly sensitive person and growing up shy, I know you've had to do a lot of internal work to even reach out to people and have those conversations, let alone make an offer to, hey, what is that work needed as a coach in your business? Because we all know that we need to do this internal work, but we know it more for our clients, but we forget in ourselves sometimes that this is the work we need to do. So what do you think is that work that we need to do to move this forward?
Yeah. So I think it's two types of fears that boil down to a deeper level. I'll call it wound or bigger fear. The first fear is fear of judgment. So what are they going to think of me? And really shifting that from what are they going to think of me to I am here to really authentically connect, add value. If that feels really true in your heart and in your gut, then they can think what they want, but you know for yourself that you are in full integrity. And usually that's not even, once we start this process, that dies down a bit. The fear of judgment actually comes up a little bit more with social media than it does with the one-on-one stuff. The second one is the fear of failure. You know, people aren't going to respond to me. People are going to be annoyed by me. That sort of leans a little bit into the judgment, or, this isn't going to work for me. And I mean, here's the thing. All of that might be true. People may not respond. People may judge you. People, maybe you don't, there isn't a client or a referral that comes from it for 3 years. What I'm getting at here is that when we can look at the potential negative outcomes and say to ourselves, okay, but I believe in myself, I believe in coaching, and I believe in what that's, the growth of the human in front of me more than I do the potential emotion that's connected to the failure, then we move forward, because it also means that you're making something about the failure mean something about you as a person or your identity. And so when we can stay more connected to the mission and the vision and what you're here to do, even when you're getting a bunch of no's or no one's responding, then you have more power to move through. So those two big fears, the fear of judgment and the fear of failure, I think then boils down to this underlying fear, which is the fear of, what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't do that? And that feels very identity focused, very like a little bit more core. And I think we can, in the work, what we do is we look at, okay, I hear you. And yet we know that you taking action and moving things forward is what is going to move your business forward. And there's this difference between your worth and the value you create in your business. And we need to really separate these two. So the value you create in your business and what happens with referrals and connections is different than your inherent worthiness as a person. And so when we start to conflate those two, that's where things get a bit messy. And so we start to look at, okay, how do I remove, maybe I failed 20 times, and maybe that starts to impact that sort of insular part of me. But how do I start to say, you know what, that's not true. I am who I am, and I'm proud of that. Let me remove the worth from the value I create. They're two separate things.
I love that, because I think that is a huge challenge for coaches, because we are human beings, and any situation you put us in, the self-worth piece comes in, and the self-worth is more the worth that's given to us, in a sense. So if we're not able to separate our service, the value that we add, from that challenge that we have internally, then it will keep showing up. And when we're reaching out to people, it'll show up in your sales calls, it'll show up and when you're making your offer, it'll show up in your coaching after that. I can't tell you how many times I've been coached by amazing coaches. Like I know that they're amazing, and when I'm giving them feedback at the end, I'm like, what happened to your confidence? Like it disappeared. And almost always they're like, oh, I was intimidated because it was you. I'm like, but it's not about you. And that is a hard thing. And the first couple of times I was with these clients, and they're like sending me charts and challenging me, like, hey, I've done all this work. Can you help me with this? If you can't, then I don't want to waste your time and my time. I'm like, I don't respond to them. I'm like, let's go do this. Let's figure this out together. So I really love this. So then on your journey, how were you able to kind of separate it? Was it just conscious awareness of it, intention around it? Or was it something that you had to consistently remind yourself of? How did you do that?
It was failing a lot, feeling the pain of that, and keep going. And then eventually seeing, if you go at something enough, you're going to come through the other side. So what I realized is, it's not so much about me and my worthiness. If I stay connected to the goal, it's just a matter of time, of like being, taking action, moving things forward. And yes, I might fail, I might stumble, things may not work. But if I do that enough, with enough belief in not only myself, but what I'm here to do, then the outcomes are going to happen. There will be clients, there will be opportunities, there will be things that I can't even imagine that happen. It's just that if there's a series of failures and you stop, that's where then you've stopped the process. But if you keep going and say, okay, the failure might hurt, but I'm not going to let it like affect my movement, then that's where the gold is. I know they often talk about, I think it's in Think and Grow Rich, where they say there was like miners mining for gold and they stopped so close to the gold. And I think that's like the ongoing growth of the coach and your business, is that there are going to be ups and downs, but you keep going because you believe so deeply in what you do, and that that you're going to really move through whatever comes up. I think really tactically in the beginning, I had a list of all the reasons why I was so proud of myself, down to from when I was a child up through college, through my 20s and my 30s, like I wrote down everything that I was like so proud of myself. And I would look at that in the very beginning every day. I did that probably for a year, what I was proud of. And so that allowed me to say, okay, I feel like I'm a woman of integrity, and I feel super proud of who I am. It wasn't so much my accomplishments. Yes, that was included in that list. more of like who I was. And reminding myself of that sort of was able to set myself up for success in the very beginning of a day where I might have faced a lot of failures too.
I love that. It seems like you have been like, and this is the journey. I feel like this is the journey of coaches, but also of entrepreneurs. That as you're moving forward, you will fall. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when, and you will feel pain. And this is a part I feel like, I don't know if I think we have a challenge with perceiving emotional pain. We don't look at it the same way as physical pain. I think we should, to be honest, because what we feel is actually much more pain than I think if it was physical pain, we would deal with it better. But because it's emotional in nature, and coaches already have done some work towards this, but if you're not aware of what's happening in your emotions and you're not allowing yourself to feel it, then I feel like what that shows up as because emotions take up a lot of our energy. It's so much. I mean, think about an argument that you've had with a spouse or with a friend or somebody. What happens to your thinking process afterwards? It's shut down. It's gone.
Yeah. Your nervous system is completely activated. You're not able to process.
Yeah, and it's like, that's like when we don't deal with that side, when we don't face those pains, it's running, and we're probably using a tiny portion of our thinking ability to run a business, which doesn't require you to be reactionary. It requires you to be step back and be strategic in what you're doing. And you can't be strategic if your fight or flight system is activated in that moment. And much of it is not even about you right now. It's mostly about you in the past.
Yeah.
You were trained to be. And this is how it is. Like for most people, they're reacting to the present based on the past. And through this work, I believe we're actually learning to help clients. Like as we're moving our business forward, we're gaining the experience to help those clients do the same thing. Because I mean, one of the quotes I think has come up in our other podcast by Rich Lippin is that you're only going to take your clients as deep as you've gone yourself. And one of those areas is that emotional pain piece. And if we're not seeing that, we're not able to move forward. And for me in the past, the way that has shown up is, and I can tell you, like the first year or two, I tried different things. So I would try a webinar, and a bunch of people would show up, mostly my friends and family, but a couple of other people would show up, and I would do it, and they wouldn't sign up. And then I was done after that. For like a month, I'm in emotional coma. And I don't know what's going on, because what is going on in my head is like, I'm just going in there posting things on social media. I'm not reaching out to anybody. I'm not even looking at the recording for that thing. What was happening was my emotions were completely overwhelmed, but I didn't know that was the case at the time until I started paying attention. Holy shoot. And I still remember when it hit me. It was in one of the certifications for CHPC. With my friend Lisa, we would usually book a hotel like around 45 minutes, 40 minutes. And because every time we'd go, we'd be in the certifications. She's not a CHPC anymore, but she's still a coach. We would walk to the certification, and we'd have conversations about everything. And I still remember that moment when we got close to the event hall. Somehow there's this process happened in my mind. I started calculating how much time had I spent to actually reach out to do marketing or reach out to people. And it was the most painful, quickest calculation I've done. It like over the past years, I think I worked on it maybe 4 weeks. Over the past year. But to me, in that process, it looked like I was doing it every day. But I was just trying to process emotions.
The emotional part of entrepreneurship, I feel like, I mean, this is such a great example of where there's like the actual work, and then there's the emotional work connected to it and our reaction to what's happening. And I love that you had the awareness and this like moment of like, oh, wait a second, these are different. And how can I have more strategies and tools for this, the emotional side, versus like, okay, like the actual sitting down and doing of the work. And this is probably, here's the thing, it's probably even true for whether, you know, in a corporate job too. There's a lot more, we're human, so we have to learn how to move through some of this, the emotional related stuff. But I think you're so spot on in saying that I think this is our work as coaches too, is how do we support people to lovingly tend to that? Because it's a natural response, right? The mammalian part of our brain is like the second biggest part. And so it's a natural response, but how do we move it from it being exactly what you said, unconscious, to then being conscious? I see this is happening. How can I direct it a little bit more today? Right. And so I think that's so big.
Yeah, and it is, and here's the other side of it. And so when I'm listening, so part of my business is I'm coaching other coaches too, and I do listen to their recordings and I'm giving them feedback. And as I'm listening to these sessions, I'm watching them. I'm watching the body language. I'm listening to the tonality. Almost always they come to a moment which is and then before that, first of all, we have to recognize that we're emotional beings primarily. we're not very logical. We have a logical center, but we're not logical. We have to deal with the emotions before we even get to the logical part.
Totally.
So if you haven't seen the emotional side of you, if you're not sensitive to it, if you haven't gone deeper and you notice you have that awareness that, oh, there it is showing up, and I need to be aware how I'm going to deal with it on the conscious level. In that session, this almost always happens. So I see the signs are right there. I'm watching the climb like, oh, this is going to be a really good thing. And the coach just walks through it, doesn't ask the questions, doesn't. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and then I go back and just to not judge the coach, I would ask them like, I would show them the climb, like, can you tell me what happened here? Like, how come you didn't ask a question, or how come you didn't challenge this client? Like, oh, I didn't even notice it. Or the other side of it will be that, sorry.
You're a friend.
Why are you wearing a mask?
Hello.
We're training. Let's go play. Okay, take it and go, please, and close the door. Say bye.
Hi. Bye.
Sorry. This is what happens when you are at home.
All fun. It's all good.
So now I have to deal with my
emotions. The emotional part, and how did you see this moment?
So as either they didn't notice it at all, or this coach is like, oh, I was too scared to go there. Like, why were you too scared to go there? Because they're scared of their own emotions. They're not scared of the clients. And this is, we underestimate that as coaches, like how much power it has over us if we're not aware.
Yes. And I think our clients long for coaching to be a place where they can explore that, even if they haven't verbally said it. Because usually, and I know from my past coaching experiences and being a coach, is usually that space is incredibly sacred and the place to process that. Sometimes we are very action oriented and move things forward, but a lot of times is exactly what you're saying, that it is an emotional experience. So coaching has such an amazing opportunity to process that, not in necessarily a therapeutic way, but in a way of let's move this forward, so that they can see the action clearly. They can get to the logic once we've moved through the emotion. So I think it's such a great opportunity for coaching in the space, and then for the coach's growth too.
Yeah. So the other side of it, one of the things that I keep hearing in what you're sharing around even your 5-step process, is that the clarity around our own vision for what we're doing. Like that's such an important piece, and coaches understand that clarity is really important, but clarity around vision, and I want to share something quick, it didn't actually hit me. It was in the second year, maybe third year of coaching, when I actually got a very painful message from somebody very close to me, saying something along the lines of a very harsh message, saying that I don't know why the hell you left your engineering career for something you're not making a dime out of, driving around in Uber, you're doing this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. And I got this message, not even personally, within a group, and it was painful. And I knew that I couldn't respond to it right away, because whatever I responded would have been very, very reactionary in that moment. I sat on it for at least a day, and I allowed myself to process the emotions. And then it was interesting. What became very clear to me from that message, that was the revelation for much of what I did in business afterwards. It actually helped me see my business and vision in a better way. Because what I was doing was that I was trying to rush my business. Like, oh, I need to get clients. I need to make sure I have income. I need to make sure this and that and the other. But much of it was not around my vision. It was actually around, and I didn't realize this, what are people going to say? I left an amazing career for this, and I don't even know what I'm doing here. It was that the fears of failure and all sorts of stuff. But when I heard that and I processed the painful emotions, what came to mind is like, and this is how I even responded, was that this is who I am. It doesn't matter if it takes me 1 year, 3 years, or 10 years, or 15 years. I'm going to figure this out. Not because of anything else, but because I feel connected to this. For the first time in my life, I feel connected to something personally. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And if you feel aligned with me, if then great. If you don't, then you're free to not associate with me if you feel embarrassed to be around me. When I said that, it was in a sense a declaration for myself that, hey, it doesn't matter how long it takes me. It didn't matter financially, but I was resourceful. I would figure that part out, but I needed to figure out to grow as a coach more than anything else, to understand how I could add value. Because if I couldn't do that, there is no business. My services didn't support people. There is no business. There is no money. There are no sales. And what I'm getting to is that my vision started becoming more and more clear that this is a long haul. This is a long-term thing. So that the setbacks that I have, they don't actually matter that much. But I wasn't that focused on the vision initially. But as I became more and more clear, and this is why a lot of my clients, I help them through their vision a lot. I help them become very clear about their vision. And then I work with a lot of investors, and they're pretty successful in what they do, but their success came from their sense of their ambitiousness. It didn't necessarily come from clarity around vision, but now they're at a stage where they want to create a different life, but they don't actually have a vision other than I want to make more money and I want to have time freedom. Like, tell me specifically what this world looks like that you're creating. Tell me who you're becoming. Tell me how you want to feel. Tell me why this is so important to you. And if you're not very clear about those things, then any problem will set you off.
Yes. And believing that maybe not that you can do it, because you shouldn't always be 100% sure that you can do it, but that you're going to figure it out. I think that's from your story, Faisal, like that's what I see the definition of confidence is. Confidence is not like, I know exactly what to say and I'm, extroverted. To me, confidence is this deep, deep feeling that no matter what, I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's what the story that you shared, I'm really feeling that is like creating that vision is a big part of it, as well as then saying, great, I'm gonna figure how to get there, and there's gonna be challenges and bumps. Yeah.
And there's one other element in there as well. And that's the identity. And I love that you had your way of responding to it by like, hey, these are my accomplishments. This is who I'm proud of who I've become. proud of what I've done. And I did it slightly differently, maybe much differently, but the way I looked at it, because I saw that my identity was a huge problem in this process, because my identity at a time was pretty broken. I was creating a new identity, but the identity that I grew up with, it was very disconnected. And this is something we underestimate, because as coaches, we learn and we have a lot of material that's empowering, but I don't know if it's fully integrated yet. And for me, it wasn't fully integrated. I had an ideal vision for who I'm becoming, but that identity that was with me was constantly creating problems for me. And that's why I loved what you said, that you separate your challenges, internal challenges, self-worth from the value that you add. But then the problem is that you carry that self with you everywhere. You literally carry it everywhere. So for me, one of the things that really helped me was the process of spirituality and the experience of spirituality, more specifically the experience of understanding who you are versus your behavior that's based on the past, versus your thoughts, versus your emotions. Because everything you think and feel in this moment is based on whatever you had experienced. It looks like you're experiencing right now, but for the most part, you're not. It's based on a past reaction. And that past is your identity that's been built up. And that identity is around mostly what people have told you who you are versus who you might be internally. It's a very caricature of who you are in that process. So what I had to do was separate, and this connects to the ideal vision quite a bit. So my ideal vision for myself became more and more real for me. And the reason for that was I kept looking at my current identity. Oh, this is going to keep showing up, but that's not who I am anymore. I didn't relate, even to this day, it stayed with me. When something happens, I react to something. Oh, that self is showing up again. I don't say that's me. I don't associate with that identity. I associate it more with the ideal of who I am. Now, it doesn't mean I'm perfect in that area. I'm going to fall a lot, but who I am is that ideal that connects more to my core, because I have some internal conception of that. And the way the model that I give to my clients is like your ideal vision of yourself is one step towards the core, the potential that you have. And every time you get there, you're going to have a different ideal vision for yourself. You're going to have, because you're growing through the process, but you're going towards an ocean of potential that you are, that you don't actually know, because it's your identity is filled with whatever you were taught. So I feel like we need to do that work, and however that takes, it doesn't matter what practice you use, because it's part of different traditions, cultures, spiritual practices, whatever it is, whatever you call it, you want to call it psychology, but separating who you're becoming from who you were is I feel like it's key, because if you associate with who you are in that moment based on who you were, you're probably going to have a very hard time moving forward. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of feeling like agility around what your identity is. So I think about it like growing up, right? 0 to 7, you're like learning and creating based off of all the programming around you, who you are. And then almost like when you're a teenager, it's like you are constantly like trying on new things of like who you might be. And I feel like in your 20s, you're trying to like express that a lot. But then at some point, and I think for me, it was lucky that it was in my late 20s, relatively early on, but that's why we have what's called a midlife crisis, right? There are these different cultural inflection points where people start to realize exactly what you said. Wait a second, maybe I'm not who I wanted to become. But there's this opening that you described around, wait a second, I have the ability to not only change, but you start to realize, okay, the past is not maybe who I am at my core. and I'm able to create who I want to be. But at the end of the day, it almost feels like if you really remove all of this, at the end, we are just blank vessels. We can go a little, sort of down the spiritual route of like, we are just truly energy and beings of, people say universe or God or source, but we do have the capability to connect into a higher version of ourselves, or a higher version, more connected to a higher source. And with that, we can be recreated many different times in this lifetime of different things that we want to be. And so there becomes like an agility more to, I think actually, and more of an acceptance of failure, more of an acceptance of trying more things, more acceptance of moving through judgment of others, because there's a little bit more of a, well, this is what I'm doing, and this is my version of me now, and I'll, that might shift and change. But I think there's such an important, it's quite cultural in how like right, that midlife crisis, that quarter life crisis, there are these almost in entertainment, that's a lot of movies around that too. And so I think there are these times that are acknowledged by society, as well as times within ourselves that feel quite personal and unique to us, that allow us to explore that a little bit more. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's a really deep conversation to have, and one that I am so grateful coaches like us can really explore and get into. Because if you stay very focused on just the external and moving things forward in coaching, you get a certain type of outcome. But being able to have this deeper level identity and spirit-led type of conversation with your clients and with other coaches too, I think is such an integral part of truly shifting human consciousness and your clients.
Yeah. I personally feel like it's really important. I want to give a clarification here. So it doesn't matter what your perspective on the deeper side of you is, whether you come from a traditional spiritual background or religious background. That can be, you can use that as a leverage. You don't need to move out of that. You can connect with that, whatever terminology, whatever rituals use there. If you don't believe in any of this stuff, use your awe towards the universe, towards nature. And I mean, I think some scientists who completely declare they're atheistic, they're more spiritual than a lot of religious people, because and you hear it in their tonality and their passion as they talk about their worlds. Like, man, and I forget his name, but famous scientist, when he talks about, it's like, we are stardust. We come from this universe, and every time I look at that, when I look at the star, and you hear it, there's so much conviction, there's so much depth in his voice and the scientist's voice, that I'm like, that is a spiritual person. He might not recognize it because he's told that he's a scientist, but spirituality is an experience. Now, you have different mediums. It could be religion, it could be science, it could be philosophy, it could be anything that will help you understand your experience better. But it doesn't matter what it is. But I feel like we need to go deeper to understand the human experience of ourselves, so we can help people move through it. Because especially if you go to the higher level, as people have accomplished their money goals and all that stuff, guess what they come back to? Fulfillment. They come back to purpose. They have, like, they've done all that they're told. There's like, what the hell do I do now? I can keep doing this, but this isn't, I feel like there's something more there, and the more is depth. And without that, I don't think there's substance in what we do, whether as coaches or even as your clients. And I just want to point out something else. So when you get to that stage where you're like, okay, so I can recreate myself any time I want, then this becomes a fun process. Failure becomes, oh shit, I'm gonna fall a lot of times. I'm gonna get back, I'm gonna screw this up. I mean, just look at this podcast. We still don't have it up on any podcast platform because we're jumping from one thing to another. We can't figure it out. And we tried Kajabi, and Kajabi doesn't host at different places. But we're on, like, half the things are not working here. It's the first time I've been able to do live on both YouTube and Facebook. But like, this is the fun process of figuring this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what that life is meant to be, that enjoyable experience, as long as you don't put all these meanings, disempowering meanings around it based on whatever identity you were given in your past. And you focus more, as you said, on the curiosity piece, like, and that's very natural to us, the curiosity. Now, I'm wondering, so like, we're getting to almost the end. I want to ask one other question. I'll ask a few questions, but this question: what would you say is the next level for you as a coach, as an influencer, as a trainer?
Yeah, great question. So I'm done a lot of one-on-one coaching for many years. And I've also done some small groups, so 3 to 6 people. And I love more intimate settings. For me, it's around teaching more frequently, because I think that's a different skill set of, there's one-on-one coaching. Group coaching is a little bit more of a different skill set around facilitation, but teaching also feels a bit different. So they're all interrelated, but to me, the next level is doing larger groups and teaching more frequently, and learning both of those skill sets. So that's been a focus of mine, of doing more workshops, partnering with other organizations to run workshops, and then as well as the group coaching that I've done. But it's definitely my next level with that.
I love that. And for me, this past year, that has been the focus. Is exactly what you said: the training and the facilitation piece, and then being more in intimate group settings. And actually, I want to share this with coaches, because I used to think that one-on-one coaching is the only one that goes really deep. And that creates the most transformation. To a degree, that's true, because you go pretty deep with a person, but I didn't really realize the power of like being in intimate groups, and helping people and actually bringing different perspective in, until I actually started doing it. And I didn't realize how transformational it is for people to come together who are thinking at that level. And so at this point, like, I love that, and I'm excited for you to go towards that more and more, and I'm actually wanting to expand that more and more, as well as I move forward. And I'm actually thinking about let's have a conversation about that too, because I think we're aligned in many ways. So I will ask you a few other questions that we ask at the end of the podcast. Which, by the way, I didn't even forgot to even share. Dr. Sherry was supposed to be here, but she is off doing all sorts of interesting adventure stuff. And I told her, I'll move this forward. That's okay. But she was kind enough to send the questions that she usually asks. So I will go ahead and ask that from you. So what would you say is one of the most influential books in your coaching journey?
Well, off the top of my head is The Highly Sensitive Person, even though it's not so much coaching related, because it helped uncover a lot about myself. And then in turn, that helped me with my coaching, and also made me realize that there's a lot of people out there that need some support in as HSPs to their next level.
Awesome. I love that. So what would you say are your hobbies? What do you do on your off time?
Yeah. So something I love doing, and we're luckily picking back up these days. I do a Brazilian partner dance called Zouk, Zouk. And my husband actually teaches it in the city and runs different dance socials. I'm just outside of New York City. So we go into the city quite a bit and dance. And now luckily there's more socials and gatherings, but do a lot of classes and learning about that. And that is its own growth journey of learning how to, not only the technique of partner dancing, it's a beautiful dance, but then also, learning how to be, a lead versus a follow, and there's lots of spiritual learnings and lessons that has come from learning Zook. So I love that, not only just to like release some steam and have fun, but also like it feels like a lot of growth that comes from it too.
I love that. You even made that fun thing about growth.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I love coaches for that, because we all do that.
Yeah.
So what would you say separates successful coaches from the ones who give up, fail, or never really get started?
I think you already said it, which is giving up. And I think you brought up such a great point, which is that if you've worked with maybe one client, two clients, and you're like, wow, this is amazing, I want to do this, know that you're going to be in it for the long game. You might have a bunch of clients in the beginning, but that there's going to be different things you need to learn throughout the process. So I think the biggest thing is just giving up, and just keep going, keep asking for support, keep learning, trying new things, and there will be something that blossoms in its right time.
Yeah, I love that. And like that theme kept coming up throughout our conversation. And there's a quote I've seen somewhere, but it says, when you get tired, rest, don't give up. And you are going to be tired physically, emotionally, spiritually, in so many ways, but rest and get started again. So I love that. Where do you feel the field of coaching is going?
Great question. Well, I think it also maps to what I had been talking about, or one of your last questions, which is that it's not so much just going to be, one-on-one coaching. There's very much a need for the coach to become a one-on-one coach, be able to facilitate groups, be able to teach, be able to really understand marketing. So I think it's more of an integrated, like, coach, teacher, facilitator. And so I really see it from that perspective of that. It's going to be, that's more for the individual, but I think that's being led by the field of people really hungry for this, whether it's companies or individuals hungry for some type of support and change. And so the coach itself themselves needs to sort of be able to have a couple different hats on.
Yeah, I love that. Agreed. So lastly, what is if you had to pick one piece of wisdom or actionable nugget that you want to make sure our coaches hear and that take away for you that they can use, what would that be?
Well, other than not giving up, I'm like feeling into what it is. I think it goes back to what we were talking about, which is that clients are everywhere. It's just the process of saying, let me step up into, outreach. Let me step up into taking that first step, going first. And there will be people that you're going to find along the journey. So I think it's about going first, taking that lead. Don't just sit behind, a social media post waiting for something to come in. Take a step first, have uncomfortable conversations, and there will be those seeds planted.
I love that. I really do. And I want to point out at the end, one thing that I heard from a billionaire in business and a very successful coach who runs this training, forget his name right now. He said that if I took you right now, because somebody asked him on a podcast, and both of them, the one was speaking, the other one was asked on a podcast, like, how do people find clients? He's like, that's not the problem at all. Just like you said, like, if I took you and knocked on 100 doors, by the end of the day, you would have 2 or 3 clients. But most people wouldn't do that. and it's us, like our challenges that come in the way. It's not like there are not enough clients, and I've heard the same exact story in every entrepreneurial circle. Oh, there aren't enough real estate deals. Then another client I talked to is like, there's too many deals coming in. I'm like, where's the reality here? It's like, so that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to thank you so much for from the bottom of my heart for being here, for sharing so much wisdom, so much perspective, and I love your experience, and I love the fact that you're creating so much ripple effect in the world, and the process that you shared, I think is going to add a lot of value. And I think I really loved our kind of deep conversation around like what it wasn't just about the process, it's about vision, identity, and how we're adding value and service in the world. And I think those are powerful leadership nuggets for whoever we're coaching. But I love your take on the highly sensitive person and how you've attracted them in your coaching practice. And I love the fact that you're going to the next level in your coaching business. And I wish you the best. And thank you so much for being with us today. Oh, thank you very much. One last thing. I knew I was going to forget one thing. Where can people find you before we go off?
Yes. So my website is my URL, Carla Blumenthal. My website is my name, carlablumenthal.com. I also have on there, I also have a separate link, a sales call ritual guide. So this is if you are doing those enrollment calls, how to prepare yourself for those enrollment calls energetically, mentally, emotionally, physically, to do those calls. So that's on my website, but I'm sure we can also include a link. And would love to connect with you.
Yeah, and I will include the link this time. I will put it in our Facebook and YouTube. And when we do have our podcast platforms up and running, you will hear about it as well. And once again, I just want to thank you all for being here, whoever's watching, listening, and we will continue next week, same time. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.